I finally watched the Roadhouse remake, and man, whoever thought making this movie was a good idea is a fucking idiot. I'm a fan of over-the-top action cinema, especially from the 80s, so you bet your sweet ass that Roadhouse from 1989 is a favorite of mine. Oh, sure, it ain't no thinking man's movie, and it has its share of detractors, but it's a movie that succeeds at being exactly what it sets out to be. It is a shameless drive-in movie on steroids. It has hard-hitting fight scenes, a pseudo-western setting, sadistic villains, plenty of full-frontal nudity, and a charisma powerhouse of a leading man. And the best thing about it is it's just so fucking fun to watch. So when I found out that this 80s action classic was going to be remade, I was immediately skeptical, and watching Jake Gyllenhaal sleepwalk for 2 fucking hours confirmed why I was right to be doubtful. Gyllenhaal carries himself in this movie like he knew he'd be compared to Patrick Swayze, and he knew he'd pale in comparison, so as a result, he just didn't even fucking try. He plays a former UFC fighter named Elwood Dalton who is troubled about a fight that he had in the octagon where he wailed on a guy after he was down and killed him. Since leaving his UFC career behind, he makes money scamming these fighters out of money in these seedy joints that hold cage fights. But then he gets offered this job by this chick who owns a bar in the Florida Keys called the Roadhouse. Yeah, it's actually called the Roadhouse in this movie. She tells Dalton that she needs help cleaning up the joint since some rough customers have been turning it into a dangerous place to be. But as it turns out, there's more to it than that. It turns out that these goons are working for this waspy developer named Brandt, played by Billy Magnuson, who wants to destroy the Roadhouse so the land will then be completely open for him to make this massive hotel resort. As Dalton earns his keep as a bouncer at the Roadhouse, he puts a spanner in the works of Brandt's plan, but not without getting a few scrapes along the way. He gets fixed up by this nurse whose name I completely forget, and they have a pseudo-romance with zero chemistry. And as the rank-and-file bad guys fail to do Dalton in, they call in none other than Conor McGregor to do the job. Yeah, his character does have a name, but fuck it, I'm just gonna call him Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor does put Dalton on the back foot for a while, and that makes him briefly consider getting the hell out of Dodge. That is until the bad guys terrorize this girl and her father who own a local bookstore. Yeah, I forgot to mention earlier, Dalton developed a kind of friendship with these two characters when he first strode into town. They're not in the movie that much, so it's really not that believable that Dalton would stick around, but the script needs him to, so he stays, he takes on the bad guys, he rescues his lady from them, he fights Conor McGregor, he stabs Conor McGregor to death, and then he leaves. The word remake carries a negative connotation among movie fans, and this version of Roadhouse is just a prime example of why that is. Oh sure, it updates it to be contemporary with the UFC connection and changing the setting from Missouri to the much more trendy Florida, but there's just no reason to watch this movie over the original. I really can't think of anything that this one does better. In the original, Patrick Swayze was stoic without coming across as boring, and he and Kelly Lynch made a very sexy on-screen couple. But Jake Gyllenhaal here is boring because he looks bored. And when he's with the love interest, it's so wooden. It's like watching a pair of 2x4s from Home Depot develop the hots for each other. Also, the original showed Dalton as a bouncer with a method to how he worked.
If somebody gets in your face and calls you a cocksucker, I want you to be nice.
Oh sure, it got tossed out the window later in the movie, but in the opening stretches, it was neat watching him teach his staff how to be bouncers, and you gradually saw their bar change from this violent dive into a respectable establishment. This remake really doesn't have that build-up, and even though it has about the same runtime as the original, it often feels like it's just trying to hurry up and tell its very sketchy story. This movie was directed by Doug Liman, who I actually like as a director. He did Edge of Tomorrow, The Bourne Identity, which is my favorite of that trilogy, by the way, and the comedy Swingers, which is awesome. But the visual style of this movie blows, especially in the fight scenes. During the fight scenes, the camera will often go to this really obnoxious POV angle, and it's just covered with CGI. It's absolutely baffling. Why the fuck does a throwdown between a couple of dudes need CGI? Just shoot the damn fight scene. Oh, I've got to talk more about Conor McGregor. He's believable in the fight scenes. Of course he is, because he's a professional fighter, but this dude doesn't just chew scenery. He rips the scenery to shreds with his... I'd call it overacting, but I struggle to use any variant of the word acting to describe his performance. Even his physical performance is laughable. The guy walks around with this exaggerated swagger like a guy in his early 20s who's trying to look tough, which you can tone it down, Connor. You're 35 and the world already knows that you're tough. The way he talks, well, that ain't much better either. Conor McGregor is Irish, so you would think he'd just use a regular Irish accent for his performance, but that's not what he does. I am still scratching my head trying to figure out what the fuck kind of accent he was shooting for here. Whatever it was, I guess it doesn't really matter since not even a resurrected Laurence Olivier could elevate the dialogue in this movie. I'm not saying the original Roadhouse is Shakespeare, but it has its fair share of quotable lines.
I want you to be nice.
I wonder if somebody calls my mama a whore.
Is she?
I used to fuck guys like you in prison.
See, you found my trophy room, Dalton. The only thing that's missing is your ass.
You want to fight, dickless?
I sure ain't gonna show you my dick.
If you watch this remake, don't expect it to have anything of the sort. The original Roadhouse has many trappings of a Western. It has a Western setup where a stranger strides into a strange town to clean things up only to be met with hostile forces. And its dusty setting lends even more to that Western feel. Not once in the '89 movie did it ever have to mention in the dialogue that it's like a Western. The dialogue in this remake pokes your eye out with lines pointing out the Western similarities. It's like the writers of this movie are saying, hey guys, we saw the original Roadhouse, and it's like totally like a Western. Aren't we clever for picking up on it? No, dipshit, you're not clever. You're the retard who wrote the remake of Roadhouse.